What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So with all of the discussion around the DRAM squeeze and prices going up for these different components, naturally people are looking towards these different gaming platforms, trying to figure out if they're going to go up in price this year. Well, now we have Nintendo's president actually responding to the question of the Switch 2 and if it will see a price increase. We'll go over exactly what he had to say here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Microsoft, some of the figures behind the scenes for games they're moving over to other platforms and some of the sales numbers certainly back their, at least short-term decisions. And we do have to take a look at a port of a Nintendo game, Mario 64, and how it's now popped up on a very unlikely platform. All of that and more. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. Guys, we're here every weekday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time, going over the world of gaming, trying to get all the news to you in roughly 20 minutes. So even if you don't see a video pop up in your subscription feed, just know there's probably a video here for you in the morning. And we're going to start today with a game called Peak. Not necessarily just the game, but the pricing around it, because there was a really funny interview that was had with GameFile and Steven Totillo, one of the co-creators of the game, as they sort of went back and forth discussing the price psychology around a game. Now we can see this. Again, this is over on GameFile, as the co-creator says, we had this joke of like, how much is a game really? Saying, in a player's mind, what does it mean to spend $5? Well, that's $5, but $6, well, that's still $5. $4? It's also kind of $5. $3 is $2, and $2 is basically free. So we've got these tiers, $12, that's $10, but $13 is $15. And we found that $8 is still $5. It doesn't become $10, $7.99, that's $5, right? So $8 going to $5 is the biggest differential we could find in pricing, so we found it very optimal. I mean, everyone understood what he just said, clearly, right? It's easy to follow that. Not at all portraying that It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, crazy mailroom with the red strings going over. Now, the pricing psychology is the idea of $9.99 looks much cheaper in your mind than $10, just $10.00. Even though it's a penny difference, and if you have sales tax on top of that, $9.99 is just going to be more than $10 anyway. So that is the thing that would be really difficult to figure out, right? Like trying to sort out how much your game should cost is probably the biggest sticking points for a lot of studios, indie game studios, or even much larger publishers. Well, it seems like Peak probably figured it out, with $8 being the correct one, as they've done very, very well. And I guess it does also come down to the idea of, is it better to sell a bunch of copies of your game at a cheaper price as opposed to selling a couple or a few at a more expensive price? I'd rather more people play the game and then potentially spread through word of mouth and make a bunch of additional revenue from multiple copies. More so than selling, again, a few and making a smaller amount of money from a larger price tag. Also, it looks like we could be getting some big update for the Division, the first Division, which, I had to double take a little bit here. It's going to be 10 years old in 2 months. That'll be in March 2020. I mean, it came out March 2016. Crazy to think about that, but you can see some images here as there is an event currently going on for the Division, and it looks like we have some marketing key art for Definitive Edition, Tom Clancy's The Division. And people are trying to figure out what this could be exactly, as I believe there's already a 60 FPS patch that was applied, I think for the PS5. So we've already kind of had some patches done to increase performance beyond what you expected on the original PS4 back when this came out. I guess they could do something where they have some more enhancements for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, and PC even, I guess, sure. But then also lump in a lot of the DLC, so it's more of an all-in-one package if you do buy in, or even just some kind of big update for current owners. And then maybe a Switch 2 port as well, as we do see Ubisoft doing a lot with their Snowdrop engine on Nintendo's new platform. I guess we'll have to keep an eye out for an update on this, because the Division 3 that's currently in development, and it sounds like, as they said, is becoming a monster behind the scenes in terms of just the game itself, the size, all of the content. So why not have the first game 10 years later, at least remind people about the franchise and get them ready for the newest one. Oh, and we do have a Resident Evil showcase to look forward to. We can see this. This is over on the Resident Evil account, saying keep your eyes on the Resident Evil showcase. That'll be January 15th, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern time. And creators, co-streaming, and reactions are encouraged. So this is clearly their last big push before Resident Evil Requiem releases at the end of February. Got like 6 or 7 weeks before it comes out now. I kind of feel like this is when the demo drops. They've done a pretty good job slowly feeding information, with the last big reveal being Leon, and it was awesome. So now on the 15th, again, like 6-7 weeks before the game releases, they do demos all the time for these big Resident Evil games. So to me, it makes sense. I'm curious if it'll be timed, how exactly they'll get around all of this. So I guess maybe look forward to a demo. That seems to be the most likely thing. Or, I mean, at the very least, just seeing more about Resident Evil Requiem, which is shaping up to be an awesome looking Resident Evil. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo and their president, Shintaro Furukawa, who did sit down with an interview, and it was paywalled on the site, but there have been a couple of other places that have picked up some key quotes that I wanted to take a look at. And while they did talk about pricing for the Switch 2 and the current squeeze around DRAM and other parts they need to have to build the system, there were some quick back and forths around plans and release lineups and different games that are in development for their new system. First though, let's take a look over on VGC. And these are machine translated, all right, from Shintaro Furukawa as he's talking with Kyoto Shimbun. Says, hardware profitability depends on factors like component procurement conditions, cost reductions through mass production, and the impact of exchange rates and tariffs. It's difficult to generalize. Fundamentally, we aim to address this by advancing component procurement over the medium to long term. We procure from suppliers based on our medium to long-term business plans, but the current memory market is very volatile. There is no immediate impact on earnings, but it is something we must monitor closely. And then when asked if it could increase its prices depending on its future procurement costs, Furukawa said that that was hypothetical, and he couldn't comment. And that is the obvious PR answer here. If you have no price increase to announce in the short term, you don't even hint towards it. He says it's hypothetical. But what's not hypothetical is what we all see happening right now with RAM, say on PC, but also video cards, solid state storage. All of this is just going up on the consumer end, and based on what's happening when it comes to AI data centers, it's becoming more and more expensive for a lot of these big hardware manufacturers right now. And yeah, that's going to include Nintendo with a system that not only does harness now solid state drive inside of their system, but also of course 12 gigabytes of RAM. So they mentioned medium to long-term procurement, or probably just contracts with different companies, trying to make sure they have enough RAM for the long term. And right now, the word's been Sony figured out stockpiling RAM a bit earlier, like they kind of saw it coming a bit, so they stockpiled enough for what seems to be half of 2026, maybe a bit more. So I kind of think the PlayStation 5 is going to weather the storm at least for a bit before most likely the price goes up. And I would say before GTA 6 releases, because whether it's $550 for the disc-based model or $600, I don't know if that $50 difference is going to be enough to dissuade someone from buying the system if GTA 6 is there on store shelves next to it, and that is the primary way they'd be playing it. It would still be cheaper than the Xbox Series X, so I mean, at that time, Sony's like, yeah, whatever, it's $600 now. I think they can work through that after probably having crossed 100 million consoles by then anyway. Nintendo, though, is in an interesting situation because they are still building up their install size, so they want the system to be as attainable as possible, and $450, that's expensive for Nintendo. Like they typically don't go to that level, and then $500 even bundled in with the game is still kind of out there for them. So I don't necessarily think they want to raise prices much at all right now, and it would be a situation where I kind of feel like their hand would be forced if, say, these contracts got even more out of hand, because that's the thing. Let's say Nintendo does have things figured out for another 6 months. Who knows what the market will look like halfway through 2026? Could be worse, maybe it could be better. But right now, they have nothing to announce. It's hypothetical, and yeah, it's probably the correct answer. But there was also some discussion around games, and we can take a look. Now, this is from Nintendo Patent Watch, who did have a really good thread over on social media, so I'll leave that link down below in the sources, where they do go through a lot of this stuff, and for the most part, they're paraphrasing some of the points that were made. But they did say, Nintendo will further enhance their software offerings from 2026 onwards. We are developing popular series titles that many fans are waiting for, but also completely new software. And I don't think it's shocking to hear, oh wow, wait, they're developing a new Mario game? Are they developing a new 3D Zelda game? Could they really be doing that? Obviously, they're doing that. Those are clear away big money makers for them. And they have the Mario movie coming up. Then they have the Zelda movie the following year. They're about to run into their entire anniversary for Zelda. So yeah, I know, shocking. a 3D Zelda game is coming. But when it comes to new software, I am wondering if they're referencing things like DragX Drive or another Labo situation. They're gonna do weird stuff. And in some regard, I do like that about Nintendo, because the thing I'll give Nintendo credit for, man, you never know what's coming. And sometimes that is exciting because, you know, it can get kind of stale or fall kind of into a rut for gaming where everything's very predictable and kind of samey. And then here's Nintendo with like their Mario Kart Live thing where it's merging RC cars with game software, or yeah, sure, Ring Fit Adventure, where it's kind of like, oh, we're gonna use this Pilates ring and turn it into an entire RPG, and you're kind of exercising at the same time. I don't mind Nintendo doing weird stuff like that because they do still turn in big time fun adventures and games like Zelda, like Mario, and so on. So I'm curious what plans they have around the Switch 2, and for that, we need to see the next big Nintendo Direct that people are, of course, now looking towards February to have happen. So I guess until then, we'll see what, I guess, new software they have. But yeah, 3D Mario, 3D Zelda, something tells me that's probably on deck. Next up, let's talk about a very unlikely landing spot for Super Mario 64. The Dreamcast. Yeah, and here's the thing. It had already gone to the Dreamcast a few months ago, but it was in a very buggy and early state. It was kind of a proof of concept, something fun. It's like, it's kind of neat to see Mario, like, you know, explode into view here at the title screen at 16 or 17 frames per second, and it looks kind of rough. There are a lot of graphical glitches. Now, though, it seems to be basically complete and polished to where, yeah, it's Mario 64 on the Dreamcast. Now, we can see this. This is from Falco over on their social media account, saying the next Nintendo 64 classic has just hit the Sega Dreamcast. Thanks once again to the efforts of Jay and Martin. Here's over a minute of Super Mario 64 gameplay captured directly from my Dreamcast. And you can see the video here. I mean, again, it's super impressive. They say it plays like a AAA native release, and they have running full speed, looking as crisp and vibrant as ever on the Dreamcast sharp 480p output. And that's the thing I'm really curious to see. So, of course, the Nintendo 64 did not have the visuals that were like the Dreamcast has a very interesting setup for display out to where games just look sharp. Like they look really clean even now. So if you can get HDMI or in that case, like VGA out, that's the easiest way to do it. Unless you're soldering stuff to the board and installing like a retro gem or something to the Dreamcast, it'll look really impressive. Again, very, very clean. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to load this up and check it out. Just Mario 64 on the Dreamcast sounds weird. It does use VMU support, so you can save games through that. And in order to build this game, you do need your own copy or your own ROM file for Mario 64. And that's kind of how they get around this and why there's really not much Nintendo can do, because they're not providing any copywritten assets. Like they're not saying, hey, here's an entire ISO file that has all the copywritten files and assets and stuff for Mario 64. You got to find that yourself. All right. They just have the underlying decompilation and program they've set up, and then you have to kind of merge the files from a Nintendo 64 ROM. So Nintendo's kind of just going to leave it there. And that's really, really neat though. Again, for big Dreamcast enthusiasts, it's probably worth loading up at least once just to check it out, and I think I'm going to be doing that here soon. Next up, let's talk about Pokémon and Lego, as there were a bunch of sets that were announced, and one of them in particular, I think had people recoiling a bit with the price, but let's take a look. This is over on Lego's website. After the announcement, we can have 3 of them here. One is Eevee, one's Pikachu and Pokeball, and one's Venusaur, Charizard, and Blastoise. Again, I'm not super into the Lego scene, so you'll have to let me know where this pricing really falls in line, because I do know there are some massive sets for Legos that can get quite intricate and expensive then. I'm always thinking about the classic, the big Death Star that takes people like days to build, a whole week or something. So I can only imagine what the price is on that. But from left to right, we have Eevee, that's $60. We have Pikachu and Pokeball at $200, and Venusaur, Charizard, and Blastoise at $650. Again, I know Lego is expensive. People let me know down in the comments if that is expensive as it looks right now from the outside, you know, on the Lego scene. Now, 2 of these are able to be pre-ordered today. That's the Pikachu and Eevee set. Those that say will ship from February 27th, 2026. And then while Venusaur, Charizard, and Blastoise don't appear to be up for pre-order at this time, it just says coming soon on February 27th, 2026. It looks like they have a gift with purchase Kanto Region badge collection. So, I mean, I guess you at least get something extra with that for the $650. I will say, though, the Venusaur, Charizard, and Blastoise, it's almost 7,000 pieces. That sounds like a lot, considering Eevee is just under 600 pieces, and then Pikachu and Pokeball is just over 2,000 pieces. So, what, it's like almost 3.5 times the amount or the size, or just how much has to go together then, and that's interesting, I guess. I mean, look, Pokemon is going to sell really, really well with any of the collaborations. LEGO knows that, so they're going all out, and they also, I guess, have the $60 Eevee set, so there's, just something there if you don't want to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars, but it's the licensing, and so it's not cheap necessarily. But still, the LEGO side, I'm curious. When you saw these prices, were you a little surprised, or were you like, well, hey, it's LEGO. It's expensive. That's just kind of the way it is. And then our last bit of news, let's talk about Microsoft and some of the ports they've been doing to other platforms. And I know it's very strange when you started to see them just rapid fire games over to the PlayStation 5, and now more and more over to Nintendo with their Switch 2. Well, we can see this. This is posted by Rhys Elliott, and this is for Alinea Analytics. All right, these are estimates, and it's interesting just to kind of see, as they do use a lot of stats and things on the marketplace to try to get to a roundabout number, but this is an eye-popping number for Microsoft, and I will say, lines up with a lot of decisions they're making right now. Forza Horizon 5 crossed 5 million copies sold on PS5 this week. Now, this was posted right at the end of last week on January 9th, saying that's over $300 million in revenue from a port of a 4-year-old game. Xbox's move to third party is no mystery, especially given Microsoft's lofty profitability mandates. I mean, for the amount of money it costs to port something like Forza Horizon 5 over to the PlayStation 5, it's not like you don't press a button and it just ports over. There's still some work to do there, but it's nowhere near what it costs to make the game outright starting up, right? But still, $300 million that you would just be generating from revenue of a game that you kind of just had in your back catalog on the Xbox. You're like, oh, let's move it over to the PS5, see how it does. It's no mystery now, as I mentioned, why all of a sudden these games are popping up everywhere. And why I do think we'll eventually get to a position where it's just day and date across the board. Like Forza Horizon 6 is just going to be on Xbox and PC on launch this year. But something tells me it won't be too much longer until it shows up on PS5. And after seeing this number, does kind of feel like a missed opportunity for Microsoft, since they just really don't have much of a focus on the Xbox Series anymore. I mean, I was by Target the other day, and they had the Xbox Series X price tag at $650. There were no consoles there. And the first thing that came to mind wasn't, oh wow, they sold out of their Xboxes. The first thing that came to my mind was, maybe they're just not really ordering Xboxes. They had every other system there. They even had the Xbox Series S, which was $400, bunch of those sitting, but no Series X's. And it was kind of telling that that's where my mind went immediately, and something tells me I'm not alone with that. So it's strange that Microsoft isn't necessarily like, oh, PS5 day one, because I do think they're going to do that with Fable, and with what Forza Horizon 5 has done here, if nothing else, I feel like Forza Horizon 6 will be on PlayStation 5, probably just ahead of the holiday season for 2026 to cash in there all over again. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday. It's Game of the Year Madness. It's day 19. Hollow Knight Silk Song versus Shinobi Art of Vengeance. I like Shinobi, but it wasn't going to stand a chance against Hollow Knight Silk Song. It's just kind of the way it goes here. Hollow Knight Silk Song, I still think, has a chance to win it all, although there are going to be a few, of course, frontrunners next to it that'll be really interesting to see when we whittle it down to like the final four, because, yeah, Hollow Knight Silk Song just has that kind of momentum. Still, though, Shinobi won a round. It was rolling here and just kind of ran into the stop sign that was Hollow Knight Silk Song. So there you go. It advances on, and Shinobi, again, a good showing, good game. If you haven't played it, highly recommend it, but that's going to be the end of its journey here in Game of the Year Madness. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from JL, who says, the Warzone gigabyte size, though, on Switch 2. Yeah, at one point, you would install everything in that Call of Duty app, and it was 300 gigabytes. It was something absurd. And they made it so you can just pick and choose what you want to have installed and what you don't want. And when you go into the app, you basically just pick the Call of Duty game you want to play anyway. So for most, you pick a Call of Duty, you probably stick with that multiplayer going forward. So yeah, it doesn't make sense to have all these different Call of Duties installed. Warzone, though, is kind of a staple for the franchise. It's a very popular free-to-play battle royale, and think it's just over 100 gigabytes right now, depending on the platform. So immediately there goes half of the Switch 2 storage size if you really want to get into Call of Duty on that platform. And it's still something they'll be struggling with as they go along and keep adding more and more Call of Duties to that application. Maybe it gets to a position where you just need an SD card, and you may as well write Call of Duty on it if it's a 256 or 512 gigabyte card, because that's very quickly going to fill up and become a Call of Duty dedicated storage device. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card, or maybe you want to hear some of my predictions that I made in a video over the weekend about what's to come for gaming in 2026, I'll leave that right below. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.